After marrying my childhood friend, we still barely know each other. Aside from our nightly routine, we hardly meet. He has an extremely calm demeanor. Even when I brought up divorce, he simply paused for a moment before lifting himself off me. All right. Understood. I said. I don't want the child either. He'll be your responsibility from now on. No problem. I insisted. These past few years must have been hard on you. Thank you. I didn't have much luggage. Everything fit into a single suitcase. Before leaving, I turned back to close the door properly. Fabian, with his scratched up, bare upper body, stood silently on the balcony smoking. Chapter 1. My sister Naomi's return to the country made the trending news. After all, she was a famous dancer from a young age. In the interview video, she wore a red dress, as flamboyant as ever. But what caught my attention was the last picture. In the half-lowered car window, Naomi's head happened to obscure part of someone's face. Though his features were unclear, the man's prominent brow, nose, and strong jawline were unmistakable. Moreover, their posture suggested they were kissing. Naomi's fans went wild, frantically trying to uncover the identity of the car's owner. I recognized the car immediately. It belonged to my husband, Fabian. After all, it was a globally limited edition Rolls-Royce Phantom, hard to mistake. It seemed Fabian wouldn't be coming home tonight. So, I comfortably claimed the 2-meter-wide bed in the bedroom. Late at night, a pair of cold arms woke me. Are you awake? The person was polite. Sorry to disturb you. My mind was still foggy, and it took me a moment to realize I should get up. But he had already wrapped his arm around me, making room for himself on half of the bed. Sorry, I said. I thought you weren't coming home tonight. The light switched on. Fabian had his back to me, removing his robe. The warm light cast a golden hue on his back muscles and neck, giving him a sculpted, oil-painting-like appearance filled with strength and beauty. A minute later, that neck was close to me. Can I kiss you? He was polite in his question, but he didn't wait for my consent. As our lips entwined, I could clearly feel the sweat slowly soaking through the skin of his neck under my hand. Fabian propped himself up, extending his long arm to open the bedside drawer. Then he frowned. Why is it gone? Sorry. I forgot to buy more, I said slowly. Fabian looked at me for a moment before lying down beside me. His tone was gentle, almost thoughtful. It's fine. I'll pick up a box on my way back from work tomorrow. A whole box. If I had known, I wouldn't have hidden it. With a stiff smile, I replied. Thanks for doing that. You're welcome. Chapter 2. When I woke up the next morning, the other half of the bed was already empty. I casually scrolled through my phone and, before I knew it, it was already noon. The person I shared a bed with last night had made it into the news again. Fabian, president of the Buy Group, was invited to watch Naomi's stage debut after her return to the country. This time, the online sleuths not only uncovered that Fabian was the owner of the car from last night, but they also analyzed the situation under a magnifying glass, concluding that the two had definitely spent the night together. Even though Fabian was wearing a high-collared black shirt, it didn't hide the hickey on his neck, and Naomi's lips, coincidentally, also had a slight bruise. Anyone could guess how intense things must have been between them last night. The gossip quickly gained traction, and soon an insider spilled the beans. Years ago, Fabian had almost given up his inheritance of the Buy Group in his desperate bid to marry Naomi. However, at the critical moment, Naomi rejected the proposal. She didn't want to give up her dance career just to become the daughter-in-law of the Buy family. After many years, the former lovers, who missed their chance, had now become the top figures in their respective fields. Every glance and gesture they shared seemed to be filled with lingering affection from the past. The comment section was flooded with praise about how well-matched they were. Only one anonymous account repeatedly posted the same message. Fake. He already has a wife. That account was quickly bombarded with replies. So what if he's married? No one can replace the unforgettable first love. He'll divorce her and chase after Naomi again. I was just about to like those comments when the topic page was flooded with a new picture. It was taken backstage after the performance, with Fabian giving Naomi a bouquet of flowers. Naomi, holding the flowers, smiled like a little girl, And Fabian, who never showed any emotion, looked at her with a rare, soft smile on his face, as if he had been infected by her joy. Although his smile was faint, it exuded an unusual tenderness. My heart stopped abruptly, and a whirlwind of complex emotions surged through me. I had known Fabian for decades and had been married to him for 5 years. I had never seen him smile at me like that. He had also never given me flowers. Chapter 3. If Naomi was the lingering obsession Fabian missed out on in his youth, then I was merely a responsibility forced on him by the family. Naomi, Fabian, and I all grew up in the same neighborhood and attended the same school. However, they studied calligraphy under the same teacher since childhood, which made their relationship closer. The first time I got Fabian's personal contact information was half a month after our wedding. Right after we got married, Fabian worked overtime for 2 weeks straight without coming home to our marital house. When my mother-in-law found out, she specifically came over and told me I wasn't being proactive in taking care of Fabian's health. So, I sent him my first message, "Sorry to bother you. Are you coming home for dinner tonight?" Half an hour later, he replied, "Who is this?" "It's Fiora. Thanks. No need to wait for me." It wasn't until 3 months later that Fabian sent me his first message. "Tomorrow. Family dinner." I replied, "Is there something you need?" "We need to visit the old family house." "All right. What should I bring?" A moment later, my phone chimed with the pleasant sound of a bank deposit notification. Postal bank account ending in 730, deposit of 1,000,000, account balance 1,123,000. Fabian's reply followed, "You can decide." From that moment, I knew Fabian would never love me. He treated me like one of his employees, dismissing me with money, but I didn't mind. Arranged marriages are like that. It didn't matter if he came home or not. As long as I could spend my money comfortably on my own. Things got slightly better after we spent one night at home together. To keep up appearances for the elders, he reluctantly shared a bed with me. I thought he wouldn't touch me, but the soup my mother-in-law made that night had a lot of extra ingredients in it. Fabian started with, "I'm sorry." Then he asked, "Is it okay?" Finally, "Tell me to stop if it's uncomfortable." I endured for a long time before finally saying, "Sorry. I think this is a bit too much." "I'm sorry." He apologized quickly. "It's fine." I could only say. Much later, I couldn't help but ask, "Why haven't you stopped yet?" Fabian finally looked up and glanced at me. Under the dim light, he seemed hesitant, but then he lowered his head and kissed me. It wasn't until much later that I found out why he lost control that night. Naomi had started dating someone abroad. That night was the day she publicly announced her relationship. Chapter 4. After discovering I was pregnant, I sent Fabian a message. It was the ultrasound report from the obstetrics department. It took him a long time to respond, "Congratulations." 5 hours later, he seemed to realize something. Postal bank account ending in 730, deposit of 5,000,000, account balance 6,123,000. "Thank you for your hard work." 6 months later, our son Santiago was born. Fabian treated Santiago very well. He set up a trust fund that would cover all of Santiago's education, medical, and living expenses for his entire life. The days passed slowly. Many people knew that Fabian was married, but no one really knew what his wife was like. Aside from our nightly routine, we hardly saw each other, and except for discussing Santiago, we didn't make small talk. In these 5 years, we never argued about anything, and we were, in a way, respectfully polite to each other. We just still didn't know each other well. At 3 p.m., I picked Santiago up from kindergarten and brought him home. As I opened the door, Naomi was lounging on the sofa in our living room, holding our dog and greeting me. "Back already?" Santiago, who usually kept a serious face, burst into an excited scream, "Auntie." He had been a fan of Naomi ever since he watched one of her dance videos, and he hadn't stopped talking about her since. Naomi ruffled his hair and smiled at me, saying, "Sis, it seems your son likes me more." Santiago, normally mature for his age, now looked at her with bright, sparkling eyes. "Auntie, why don't you live with us and never leave again?" I carried the groceries I'd bought into the kitchen. and even from a distance, I could hear Naomi's cheerful laughter. If I live here, where will your mom go? She can leave, Santiago said. She doesn't really do anything here anyway. The sound of running water from the faucet filled the kitchen. Suddenly, the door opened. Fabian stood at the entrance, looking a bit tired. Can I come in? Sure. What's up? He pointed at the pot on the stove. The soup smells really good. Can I have some? Of course. I nodded. I had made it for Fabian anyway. I served him a bowl and handed it to him. Fabian took it, saying, "Thank you for your hard work." As I stepped out, I noticed Naomi suddenly smiling at me. She said, "Sis, your soup is as delicious as ever." I froze for a moment and saw that the bowl I had just served was now in Naomi's hands. She drank it contentedly, letting out a sigh of satisfaction. "I'm so jealous that you know how to cook. Unlike me, I've never even set foot in a kitchen." Santiago chimed in. "Auntie, you're such a great dancer. It doesn't matter if you can't cook. My mom can cook for you." Santiago had always been spoiled by the Bai family. I was the only one who had any expectations for him, never allowing him to behave excessively or bully other kids just because of our family's status. As a result, Santiago never liked me. He was just like his father, only caring about the things, or people, he liked. Naomi wasn't wrong. Not just my husband, but my son, and even my dog, preferred her over me. It was at that moment that I made up my mind to get a divorce. Chapter 5. I brought up the divorce with Fabian one evening. A week later, we had just finished. Suddenly, he mentioned that he had to go out for something urgent. I interrupted him, saying that I also had something to discuss. As expected, he didn't have much of a reaction after I said it. He just paused for a moment, then lifted himself off me, his expression blank. "All right, noted." It was as if he was acknowledging a notice from his secretary. I said, "I don't want the child either. He'll be your responsibility from now on." "No problem," I insisted. "These past few years must have been hard on you." "Thank you, considering there were no feelings involved. It must have been tough for him to sleep with me for so many years." I didn't have much luggage. Everything fit into a single suitcase. The divorce agreement was left on the table in the living room, already signed. Before leaving, I turned back to close the door properly. Fabian, his scratched-up bare upper body exposed, stood silently on the balcony smoking. I didn't tell anyone about the divorce. Santiago was asleep in his room, farther away, at the Lin family's house. My parents were celebrating Naomi's birthday. Once Fabian finished his cigarette, he would go out to see Naomi too. He'd bring along the gift he had prepared in his study, a custom-made red dance dress. When I first saw it, I liked it too, but like this marriage, it was never meant to be mine. No one remembered that when I was younger. I had also won a trophy in the National Youth Division of the Peach and Plum Cup. My teachers used to say that my physical talent was something that only 1 in 500 or even 1 in 1,000 dancers possessed. But after I accidentally fell from the stage, I was never able to dance again. After that, I shut myself in my room and cried every day. It was the most painful memory of my life. My parents were saddened for a while too, but soon after, they sent Naomi to the same teacher for training. Maybe the younger sister will surpass the older one's talent, they said. From then on, I couldn't bear to see anything related to dance. Tonight, like countless other nights, was just an ordinary evening. The breeze was light, and the moon was bright. From the moment I decided to leave, all the way to boarding the plane, I didn't look back. After I boarded the plane, a beautiful flight attendant brought me a small cake. "Dear Madam, thank you for choosing our airline. On behalf of the entire crew, we wish you a happy birthday." I was momentarily stunned. Then I smiled at her. "Thank you." Chapter 6. My destination was my grandmother's house in the countryside. After the flight, I had to take a high-speed train, and then there was a dedicated tourist bus that would take me to my grandmother's village. In recent years, the village where my grandmother lived had been developed by the government into a tourist attraction, and there was now a daily train service to and from the area. After enduring 5 or 6 hours of travel, the bus wound its way along the mountain road. Looking out through the old glass window, The white clouds seemed to grow from the earth, and both the wind and heat greeted me all at once. I took a few photos and happily posted them on Weibo. The sudden ringing of my phone interrupted my peaceful moment. It was a call from Fabian. "What do you need?" "Santi has a fever. Do you know where the medicine box is?" "The storage room on the second floor." "Got it." After a moment of silence, Fabian continued. "Found it. Thanks." "No problem." Just as I was about to hang up, Fabian spoke again. "Say hi to your grandma for me. Come back when you've had enough fun. Santi keeps calling for you." Holding the phone, I replied, "You should tell him that we've already divorced." I heard a click, as if Fabian had lit a cigarette. His voice remained calm. "Is this because of Dominic?" "Dominic?" It took me a while to recall the name from my memory. Suddenly, I felt puzzled. What does he have to do with this? "He's back in the country," Fabian said. "Your IP addresses are in the same location." "Fabian," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "You don't seem to be thinking clearly right now. I don't understand what you're saying, nor do I want to. If you can't find something in the future, ask the housekeeper. If you or Santi are sick, take him to the doctor. I hope that from now on, we live without interfering in each other's lives." Fabian was silent for a moment. "All right. As you wish." Chapter 7. When I arrived at my grandmother's house, I was filled with excitement. The once quaint village had become more modernized, but it still retained the unique charm of the local minority culture. The familiar front yard, the familiar grape trellis, the familiar stream, but there was an unfamiliar person at the entrance. He was young, wearing a black t-shirt and a silver bone necklace. It looked like he had just washed his hair, as he was still surrounded by a cool mist. Pushing my suitcase, I hesitated as I looked at him, and he continued to stare at me. As we got closer, we both suddenly realized who the other was and spoke simultaneously. "Dominic? Fiora?" What a coincidence. I had come back to my hometown, only to run into an old teammate from dance competitions. While I gave up dancing due to injury, Dominic had never stopped. After graduating from college, he, like Naomi, went abroad to further his studies. I had seen their promotional posters many times. Fabian knew his schedule so well because of Naomi. They were part of the same dance troupe. Dominic said that after returning to the country, he wanted to create a unique dance inspired by minority culture, and my grandmother's village had gained fame in recent years for its cultural heritage. So he came here to find inspiration. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Dominic suddenly asked me, somewhat cautiously, "Fiora, have you ever tried dancing again since back then?" I was silent for a moment. Dominic continued, "I met a doctor abroad who specializes in this field. His institution focuses on rehabilitation treatment for these kinds of injuries. Fiora, if you still want to dance, would you like to give it a try? The success rate might not be 100%, Dominic added, and the treatment might be expensive. If you need help, I could lend you the money." Worried he might have said something wrong, Dominic looked at me anxiously. "Of course, if you're not interested, just forget I said anything." In the years following my accident, I had never given up on rehabilitation, but those treatments never worked in the end. With each expensive round of therapy, my hopes rose, only to be crushed again and again. Eventually, when my family's business started failing and we couldn't afford the treatments anymore, I gave up. I married Fabian, hiding in the fog of our marriage for years, having long since lost my drive. I wanted to refuse Dominic, but the words that came out were, "I want to, even if there's only a 10% chance. I want to try." After saying it, I stood there, stunned. My hands trembled slightly, uncontrollably. My body still wasn't ready to give up. Plans quickly changed. After having dinner with my grandmother in the village, I contacted the professor Dominic had mentioned. Professor Luis asked me a lot of questions, explaining that he had successfully treated similar cases before and told me not to worry. His assistant even scheduled an appointment for next month. After I hung up, I thought I was dreaming. Beside me, Dominic seemed more excited than I was. "That's great, Fiora!" "Thank you." My heartbeat quickened, and everything around me felt surreal. But Dominic shook his head. I'm actually doing this for myself too. Fiora, if your treatment goes well, I'd like to ask you for a favor. Sure. I didn't ask what kind of favor, I agreed immediately. Chapter 8. A month later, I flew abroad and arrived at Professor Luis's medical facility. Though I didn't speak the language and didn't know anyone, my days were filled with repetitive rehabilitation exercises. But the right foot I thought would remain stiff forever was slowly waking up. Sometimes, I could even perform some of the dance movements I used to know. Professor Luis told me that compared to other patients, my condition wasn't that severe. Since I had been careful all these years, it wouldn't be long before I could leave the facility. Your body is stronger than you think, he said. All these years, it's been quietly healing you. What we needed was just time. Because of his words, I abandoned all other plans and dedicated all my time and energy to the rehabilitation program. The staff even remarked that I showed up earlier than their clock-in time every day. Lynn, that's it for today's rehab, the assistant said with a smile. Same time tomorrow. If you arrive early, just let yourself in. She left. I stayed behind at the facility, tidying up my things. Fiora, a round-faced girl in a wheelchair, called to me from the doorway. Are you coming? Her name was Joy, a fellow countrywoman. We lived in the same dormitory. Joy's condition was more severe than mine. She was a tennis player, paralyzed after a car accident, and had been in a wheelchair for 5 years. Every night, we made dinner together and then took a walk by the river. But tonight, Joy seemed to be in a bad mood. It wasn't until we returned to the dormitory that she finally spoke. Professor Luis said it's unlikely my legs will recover, and I saw his wedding photo online. I knew who Joy was talking about. Her mixed doubles partner, whom she had known since middle school. They had made a pact in high school to pursue the same career together for life. After countless hours of training, they were finally able to compete together, but then the accident happened. Though she survived, her legs were left permanently paralyzed. Joy locked away her tennis racket, ended the relationship, and left the country. It was said that the boy had been single for 5 years, waiting for her. Now, he was getting married. I'm happy for him, Joy said as she wiped away her tears. No one stays in the same place forever. It's a good thing he's moving forward, but I don't know why I still feel like I'm being left behind. Does that make me a terrible person? I patted her head and handed her a tissue. Joy opened a bottle of wine, and after drinking a bit, she fell asleep. I tucked her into bed, and just as I finished, I received a text from an unknown number. Grandma said you went abroad. Do you have enough money? I stared at it, unable to guess who it could be. Then, a moment later, postal bank account ending in 730, deposit of 1,000,000, account balance 4,000,000. At that instant, I knew who owned this new number. I stared at the message for a while before transferring the money back. Chapter 9. As my rehabilitation was nearing its end, Dominic, who happened to be nearby, offered to come pick me up. He chatted with Professor Luis for quite a while, then turned to me with a smile and said, "Congratulations. Great dancer, Fiora." I was startled. That's way too exaggerated. I've just recovered, and I still have a long way to go. Besides, I don't think anyone would want me right now. Dominic's smile faded as he said, "Do you remember I mentioned I would ask you for a favor?" I nodded. He scratched his nose. "I've completed my choreography, but I'm missing a lead dancer. Fiora, would you consider it?" I was completely stunned. "No, it's only for a few small theater performances to start with," Dominic said. "Even if it doesn't go perfectly, it's okay. There's no pressure. Take your time and think about it." I knew I should say no. This was Dominic's important creation. There were surely other professional dancers better suited for this opportunity than I was. But in that moment, when I opened my mouth, no words of refusal came out. I wanted this opportunity so badly. When I got back, Joy found out about it and scolded me. "Why would you even think about refusing? You must do it." She dug out my suitcase. "If you dare give up, I'll never acknowledge you as my friend again. Do you know, Fiora, Enduring pain is easy. All you need to do is stay in place and wallow in self-pity. But taking action to change your pain is incredibly difficult. You have to tear yourself apart, rebuild, and keep moving forward just to catch a glimpse of opportunity. And for that little bit of opportunity, there are many people competing with you. I've already been weak enough, she said with a bitter smile. But I hope my friend can be brave. So don't be afraid, Fiora. Move forward. Soon enough, my rehabilitation was over. I cleaned the dormitory thoroughly and filled the fridge with food, reminding Joy to message me if she needed anything. Though we had known each other for only a short time, I found it hard to say goodbye. Stop dragging it out and just go already, Joy urged impatiently. The last image I had of her was sitting by the window, waving goodbye. Sunlight bathed her clean, soft face, and she kept smiling, as if she had no worries at all. That was the last time I saw her. Chapter 10. When I returned to the country, my parents finally found out that Fabian and I had divorced. They were furious. Are you out of your mind? A husband this wealthy, others would kill to marry him. We worked so hard to pave such a good path for you, and now you just throw it all away? After the scolding, they threatened me, telling me to quickly reconcile with Fabian. For Santiago's sake, they said, he would agree to remarry me. I refused. My father was so angry that he clutched his chest. You must have lost your mind. How did I end up with such a fool for a daughter? My mother said nothing, only looked at me with disappointment. I sat on the couch in the living room, feeling like I had shrunk down to the size of a child as soon as I came home. He has someone else he loves. He doesn't care about me at all, I said. So what? My father snapped. Even if he cheats, you still have to stay in that house your entire life. Once the child inherits his fortune, you'll have everything. By then, what can't you get? Fiora, you're 26. You're not a naive little girl anymore. You can't just think about yourself. You need to think about the family too. I shook my head. With Naomi around, Fabian won't pull his investment from our company. He's always wanted to marry Naomi. You both know that, don't you? Soon enough, you'll receive the news of their engagement. But it was like they didn't hear a word I said. My father sternly declared, if you insist on this, don't ever step foot in this house again. I stood up and placed my father's heart medication in front of him, holding back my tears. Mom, Dad, all these years, I've put you ahead of myself so many times. Now, I just want to think about myself for once. If you can't accept that, then consider me as someone who was never born. They were stunned. They had never imagined that their obedient daughter could be this stubborn. I rented a new apartment and cut off all contact with my family. Every day, I spent almost all my time in the dance studio, practicing Dominic's choreography. Most of the people in the dance troupe were quirky but easy to get along with, a stark contrast to the heavy, oppressive atmosphere at home. They joked around most of the time, but as soon as it came to dancing, they became serious. I didn't want to fall behind. For a long time, my routine consisted of waking up at 8 a.m., going to rehearsals, practicing the choreography, discussing details with Dominic and the others, training until exhaustion, then returning to my small rented apartment to collapse into bed. This life was certainly not as comfortable as being Mrs. Bai. Without a housekeeper or a nanny, I had to handle everything myself. On top of that, the house leaked when it rained, the commute took 2 hours by metro, and I didn't have time to clean. I thought I wouldn't be able to adjust, but the exhaustion left me with no time to feel lost or anxious about my new life. Gradually, I forgot about all the troubles of the world, throwing myself completely into the rehearsal of this dance performance. Chapter 11. One day after work, Dominic suddenly suggested we walk home together, calling it a city walk. We strolled through the streets at night, moving from one street lamp to the next. When we finished walking down the street, we arrived at the neighborhood where I rented my one-bedroom apartment. Dominic said I had completely changed from how I looked 6 months ago. Do I look more unkempt now? I asked. If my parents saw me now, they probably wouldn't recognize me. Compared to how I used to dress in brand-name clothes as a housewife, now I just throw on a t-shirt and sneakers before heading out. I've also become less polite, even joining the dance troupe and swearing sometimes. I read online that when you curse, your soul becomes cleaner. I truly believe that. Maybe so, Dominic said, rubbing his nose. Back then, you were very polished and beautiful, but your eyes were sad. Now, even though you dress more casually, you actually smile. I like this version of you. After he said that, his face suddenly turned red, and the atmosphere between us became a bit awkward. We had reached my apartment door, and I also felt a little embarrassed. To cover it up, I pulled out my keys to unlock the door, but suddenly I was pulled behind a tall figure. Fabian stood in front of me, calmly asking, "Who is he? And who are you?" Dominic asked. Fabian's face remained expressionless. "We have a child together. What about you?" Just as Dominic was about to answer, I pushed him, signaling for him to stay quiet. "We're divorced." I added to Fabian, "The child doesn't have much to do with me anymore either, but I'll still pay for his expenses." I continued to unlock the apartment door. Neither Fabian nor Dominic made any move to leave, so I politely asked, "Would you like some tea?" Steam rose from the teacups. Fabian sat on the sofa in the living room. It was a single chair, but somehow it seemed a little cramped for him. Dominic followed me around the kitchen like a puppy. "No, it's fine. I don't need any tea." "What? You're making me a glass of orange juice?" "Well, I know where it is. It's not my first time here. I'll make it myself." The tea went cold. Fabian still hadn't left, nor had he said anything, so I asked, "Is there something else? I'm getting ready for bed." Fabian glanced at Dominic and suddenly smiled, though for no apparent reason. "So, it's all because of this little pretty boy, huh? When did this start?" I had danced all day and was too tired to explain. "If that's what you think, then sure, fine." Fabian nodded, setting down the teacup. His face remained composed, but the veins on the back of his hand bulged with tension. "Fiora, you'll regret your choices." He stood up and left without another word, his expression cold. After he left, Dominic suddenly asked, "Did I interrupt something between you two?" I glanced at him and joked, "Yeah, you did." "Oh," Dominic responded, then slowly asked, "So, does that mean I'm responsible now?" He didn't smile or move. His eyelids lowered, as if he was seriously looking at me. I'm 3 years older than Dominic and started dancing earlier than he did, so I was considered his senior. Back when he was trying to control his weight and starving, I was the one who secretly took him out to buy snacks. When the teacher found out and scolded me, Dominic stood in front of me, crying and saying it was all his fault. Because of that, even though I knew he was popular among his peers, I had always thought of him as a younger brother. Somehow, Dominic had grown up. I was just kidding, I quickly explained. "But I wasn't," Dominic replied. The cool breeze from the old air conditioner blew around us. "Sorry," Dominic sighed. "Well, I've been rejected once." Casually, he walked to the door and opened it. "It's late. I won't bother you anymore." As I watched him leave, I hesitated for a moment and asked, "So, can I still come to practice with the troupe tomorrow?" "No." I stared at him, startled. "You really believed that?" Dominic grumbled. "Do you think I'm the type to abuse my power?" Relieved, I stood up to see him out. "So, see you tomorrow?" Dominic stood at the doorway, looking at me. "Fiora, huh?" I moved closer, even though I'm a bit sad. "This is just the first time. You still have 100 chances to reject me." With that, he quickly turned away. "See you tomorrow." After closing the door, I stood still for a moment before heading back to the living room to close the windows. A small red glow flickered under the street lamp. Fabian was still there, holding a cigarette, his side profile wrapped in smoke. In the moonlight, his gaze toward Dominic was icy cold. Chapter 12. The dance performance was scheduled for next week. It wasn't until the official rehearsal that I realized Dominic had been far too modest. The so-called small theater was actually the Bowning Theater, the largest in the city, where nearly all of the country's most popular plays and stage performances were held. During rehearsal, Dominic brought out a DV camera and recorded the entire session. "For when we get famous, we can make a documentary," he said, pointing the camera at me. Come on, say something. Our lead dancer. I hope the performance is a success, and the event goes viral. Dominic shook his head. Too formal. Try again. Dominic. Someone called out to him. Mr. Liu is looking for you. Dominic left, and I turned on the DV to watch the earlier recorded rehearsal footage. My heart was still pounding from the intense exercise. Dominic's choreography for this Youve dance was titled Bluebird, and the main character was a mystical bird living in the forest. On screen, I was dressed in an elaborate costume of blue feathers, with light green eyeshadow that made me look like a truly mysterious and graceful bird. The other dancers were chatting, discussing where to go for dinner after the opening night performance. Dominic came down from upstairs, looking a bit pale. He cleared his throat and made an announcement in a calm voice. The opening night performance was being postponed, and the venue was being moved to a different theater. The troupe immediately erupted. Why? That theater's stage is awful. Why would you risk your reputation, Dominic? No matter what they said, Dominic remained composed. So what if it's a smaller venue? It's the same audience. We just need to do a great job with our performance. He said this. But a few days later, I overheard some of the troupe members talking, and I learned that the other theater had also rejected our show. Even the most oblivious among us realized something was wrong. People usually beg us to perform. How could this be happening? Who messed up? The troupe members were in an uproar. When I went to the restroom, I overheard some people whispering outside. Apparently, the sponsor, By Corporation, doesn't approve of the casting. They think our lead dancer isn't famous enough to draw a crowd, so tickets won't sell. And originally, Bai's CEO wanted Naomi as the lead. She's more popular, but Dominic refused. Honestly, why didn't Dominic invite Naomi this time? Does Fiora have some kind of connection? If she did, they wouldn't be replacing her. He probably just likes her. Haven't you noticed how he looks at Fiora? Even if he likes her, he can't gamble with all of our futures. It's ridiculous. I stood frozen for a moment outside the restroom when my phone suddenly lit up with a message. It was from Fabian. Fiora, do you have time to talk now? Chapter 13. I returned to the Bai residence. The white villa was nestled among the mountains and lakes in the suburbs, still as opulent as ever. The driver dropped me off at the main entrance of the mansion. Inside the grand hall, Fabian was sitting by the edge of the marble table, looking at me calmly. You're back. Nothing inside the house had changed since I left. My pink slippers were still placed at the entryway. The white roses I had put in the golden vase in the living room were still there, but they had long since withered. Santiago, led by the nanny, obediently called out to me, "Mommy." His eyes turned red, and tears started falling. I missed you so much. I dreamed of you every night. Why didn't you come back to see me? I turned my head toward Fabian. Let's get to the point. What do you want? Ever since our divorce, Fabian's every move had left me baffled. Nothing much, Fabian said. I just want you to come back and continue living here. I'll provide you with money, clothes, jewelry, whatever you need. If you want to dance, I'll give you the best planners, bigger venues, and better colleagues. As long as you're with me, no theater will ever turn you away. Fabian took a sip of coffee. Think about it. Can Dominic offer you any of this? Really? I asked. What's the price? There's no price, Fabian said with a laugh, as if amused. Just keep things as they are. Santiago needs a mother, and I need a wife. I looked at him for a moment. What? Did Naomi reject your proposal again? After all, Fabian had chosen me because Naomi turned him down. Fabian's expression grew embarrassed, and his voice turned cold. What does she have to do with this? Say whatever you want, but if you came here to talk about this, I can give you my answer now. I don't need what you're offering. Is it worth it? Fabian asked, laughing angrily. To give up the life I'm offering you for some man? Fabian, I've told you before, it's not about him. You just refuse to believe me. And as for whether it's worth it, I smiled faintly. It's not about worth. It's about what I want. Fine. You're so righteous, Fabian said coldly. But what about your dance troupe members? Can they handle losing work over and over again? And Dominic? He can't even protect himself. What can he possibly give you? You're threatening me, I said. I'm just laying out the facts. Did you weigh the pros and cons when you married me? I asked, laughing, because I'm Naomi's sister, and even if she rejected you, you could still stay close to her in this way? Fabian, if this is your idea of weighing the pros and cons, then you only disgust me. Fabian was stunned, and the coffee cup slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor with a crisp sound. The butler, sensing the tension, had already taken Santiago downstairs. Fabian stood up and took a few steps toward me. Do you always have to speak to me with this sharp, sarcastic tone? Then we have nothing more to say. Fabian grabbed my hand. He seemed truly angry, his eyes bloodshot. Fiora, what is it? What do you want from me? Haven't I been good to you? I remained silent. Fabian seemed frustrated, sighing deeply, his voice suddenly soft and low. Fiora, can't you say whatever you want from now on? If there's something you don't like about me, He paused for a long time before finally whispering, I can change. There's no need. I said, we're already divorced. None of this matters anymore. Fabian stared at me for a moment, then picked up his phone and made a call. Hello, Pablo? It's me. I don't think Dominic is suitable to lead your troop. I snatched the phone out of his hand and hung up immediately. This is between us, I said, my chest heaving with anger. There's no need to drag innocent people into it. Fabian looked at me with dark eyes, extending his hand. Then come back to me, Fiora. I'm not a good person, but I can give you anything you want. Chapter 14. I called Dominic to tell him I was quitting the dance performance. He was stunned on the phone. Why? Because I hesitated on the phone too, finally speaking after a pause. The theater we're performing in is too rundown, and I'm someone meant to be on the biggest stage. How could I settle for a place like that? Dominic stayed silent, his breathing audible. Just wait a bit longer, okay? I'll get better, and I'll get you on a bigger stage. Dominic, I interrupted him. Don't you understand what no means? Replace me. Don't keep insisting on using me. I hung up the phone. Fabian, sitting beside me, stroked my hair. Good girl. Have you become an idiot? I asked, feeling disgusted. Yes, I have. Fabian replied without flinching. You're such a jerk. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Just as I was in the middle of a tirade, Fabian grabbed my chin. He leaned closer, our breaths starting to mix together. Before he could kiss me, I raised my hand and pushed him away. Do you remember our 1-month bet? Fabian's face darkened, but he still said, I remember. Until that bet is over, keep your distance, I said. Fabian's face turned cold as he stood up straight and walked away. The world doesn't stop for anyone's absence. On the dance troupe's official platform, the group photo that once featured us all was replaced with a solo poster of Naomi. As always, Naomi's picture was full of allure, like a seductive red rose. After she replaced me as the lead, the buzz around the show increased significantly. The comments under the poster multiplied by the dozens, and the tickets sold out quickly. The poster also listed the performance venue, back at the originally selected Grand Theater. And during the hottest time slot, I turned off my phone and played the music for the solo dance I had practiced countless times. Spinning, turning, leaping. In the empty room, I recalled the movements I had refined over the past few months. Over and over, Dominic had choreographed this solo piece with near-genius creativity. It was the dance of the mystical bird, cast out by its people, pouring out its emotions in a frenzy of loneliness by the lake. Even someone with no understanding of dance could see the technical difficulty and emotional depth of this solo. I knew all too well that I would never have the chance to perform it again. It was like a flower seedling that had been nurtured for a long time, watered and weeded every day with care. Finally, one day, it bloomed, but before it could fully blossom, a passerby plucked it. No one cared about the long, sleepless nights it had spent waiting and hoping to bloom. Once a flower wilts, it's gone. Once an opportunity is missed, it's gone forever. Chapter 15. During this time, Fabian stayed at the villa in the suburbs every day. He no longer came home only at night, like before. Even when dealing with company matters, he did so from the study. On the surface, it seemed that Fabian had done what he said he would, whatever he did wrong before. He corrected. But in reality, he was just staying home to monitor me. On the day of Naomi's performance, Fabian sat in the living room, reading a storybook to Santiago. On the nearby table, his phone kept buzzing, but he didn't even glance at it. Santiago looked at his father a few times. "Are you not going out tonight?" "No, but tonight, Auntie has a performance. You used to take me to see her." "Shut up," Fabian said coldly. Time passed slowly, minute by minute. Suddenly, Santiago's smartwatch rang. He answered. "Hello, Auntie." I didn't know what was said on the other end, but tears instantly welled up in his eyes. He urgently asked, "Does it hurt a lot right now?" "Okay, Dad, and I will come right away." "What happened?" Fabian asked, frowning. "Dad, Auntie fell during her performance," Santiago said. "We need to go help her." Fabian's expression changed instantly. He stood up, his face filled with regret and anger, and he called the driver. He quickly threw on a jacket, but just before leaving, he seemed to remember something and turned to look at me. "Fiora." "Yes? Can we make an exception this time?" Fabian asked. Santiago looked at the two of us, confused, not understanding why his father hadn't left yet when something so important had happened. "No," I said, staring directly at him. "The agreement is clear, isn't it?" Half a month ago, Fabian used Dominic and the troupe as leverage to keep me by his side. He said he could give me everything, but all I asked was for him to make a bet with me. It was the simplest bet I had ever made in my life. I told him, if he could go 1 month without seeing Naomi, I would agree to his conditions. Fabian seemed to think it was easy and agreed on the spot. He thought it would be as simple as going a month without seeing Naomi. But in fact, I knew him better than he knew himself. Naomi held too special a place in his heart. He couldn't, and wouldn't, refuse any of her requests. Fabian stood there, as if struck by an invisible lightning bolt. Split in two, Santiago raised his smartwatch and showed a picture. "Auntie sent me a photo. Her leg is all bloody, and she's in a lot of pain." "Dad, why are you hesitating? This isn't like you at all." Fabian closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. "I'm sorry," he said to me. "Fiora, I'll explain everything later." Then he turned around, picked up Santiago, and ran out without hesitation. Chapter 16. News of the famous dancer Naomi's injury during her performance had already made headlines. No one cared what the performance was about. What people were more excited to discuss was how Fabian used the Bai family's power to send her to the hospital via helicopter. In the comments, many praised their fairy tale romance, with only a few remarks pointing out that before her accident, Naomi's performance was lackluster, failing to capture the essence of the choreography. But those posts were quickly deleted after being bombarded by Naomi's fans. Naomi, at the center of all this attention, also sent me a photo. In it, Fabian and Santiago sat by her hospital bed, one pouring her water, the other peeling an apple, like a picture-perfect family. I knew what she meant. The message was clear: you've lost again. She always enjoyed playing these childish games of love with me. When we were kids, it was competing for our parents' love. After I got married, it became a competition for Fabian's and Santiago's love. She always had to be the one who came out on top, and this time was no different. But in reality, I hadn't lost. I had started this war. These past few days, I'd been sending Naomi a photo of Fabian every day. There are only 2 people in this world I know best, Fabian and Naomi. It might sound dark, but it's true. Fabian doesn't understand why. No matter how many times he sacrifices for Naomi, she always pushes him away, because Naomi is the kind of person who, once she has someone's love, no longer cares for them. She rejects Fabian out of a deep-seated fear, a fear that once she's caught, she'll no longer receive this special treatment. After all, only by being a distant, unattainable moon can she be endlessly pursued. So when she realized that Fabian was starting to distance himself from her, prioritizing someone he had once disregarded, me, her mindset began to change. She couldn't stand it. She couldn't bear to lose. The photos I sent her each day of Fabian at home with me only amplified this feeling. The more Fabian avoided seeing her, the more Naomi became desperate to cling to him. That's why Fabian could never win this bet. What I didn't expect was for Naomi to use her own body as a bargaining chip. Naomi thought she had one, but she couldn't have been more wrong. A healthy, agile body is a dancer's most valuable asset. The love she's chasing, it's nothing more than a glittering illusion. Chapter 17. Perhaps out of guilt. This time when I moved back into my rented apartment, Fabian didn't stop me. The Bluebird poster was replaced once again, though this time it was reportedly at Dominic's request. After Naomi's injury, she could no longer perform. Dominic didn't reach out to other dancers for help. He announced on the public platform that no one could capture the spirit of Bluebird anymore. So, all remaining performances were cancelled one by one. After reading through numerous harsh comments in the reviews, I knocked on Dominic's door once more. He didn't seem to be in a good place. His usually stylish hair was now a tangled mess, and he answered the door wearing only gray lounge pants. "Hi," I greeted awkwardly. Even though Naomi had passed up the opportunity, I still wanted to seize it. But after how harsh I had been the last time, I figured Dominic would probably hold a grudge. And sure enough, he looked at me with a blank expression and said, "If you've come to pity me, I don't need it." Seeing his cold demeanor, I shrank back a little. I just wanted to ask, "Is your troupe still looking for dancers?" I'd like to volunteer, if that's okay." Dominic stared at me for a moment, his expression unchanged. Why would I, after being abandoned once, let someone do it to me again? I felt a bit disheartened but knew it was my fault. Just as I was about to turn and leave, Dominic grabbed my hand tightly. "Is that all you're going to say before walking away? You give up so easily. Can't you try to persuade me just a little?" I was silent for a while. "No. I was actually planning on asking you every day until you said yes." "Well, I'm agreeing right now," Dominic said through gritted teeth. "Get inside and sign the contract." Chapter 18. Not long after, Bluebird was performed again. Before the official performance, no one had high expectations for the show. The top comment in the discussion read, "If Naomi couldn't pull it off, what other dancer in the country could save this performance?" Dominic replied, "She can." That response went viral, and Naomi's fans quickly found out about me and tore into me online. On the night of the performance, the entire theater was silent. During my solo, it felt as though the whole world had gone quiet. All I could hear was my own breathing and the sound of my heartbeat. I later learned that half the audience that night was made up of Naomi's fans. They had come, hoping to see me fail, but that didn't stop the thunderous applause after the performance ended. Cheers, clapping, and murmurs about how stunning the show had been filled the theater. At the audience's insistence, we performed the closing dance for the curtain call over and over again. That year, Bluebird became the highest-grossing dance performance. Many people who weren't originally interested in dance came to the theater after seeing the images and rave reviews shared by other audience members. Our tour expanded to cover over a dozen cities nationwide. Among the many audience members I remember, some stood out the most. The first ones were my parents. They didn't tell me they were coming. They just sat in the front row, watching the entire performance with stern expressions. After the show, I went to see them. "Your body has recovered, but now your sister's leg is injured," my mom said sadly. "Is it always going to be like this, where one of my daughters is hurt?" My dad added, "At least something good came out of it. She's finally settled down and agreed to marry Fabian." Perhaps because my performance brought me some fame, they suddenly found value in me again. My parents were polite to me once more and even left me a key to their house before they left. I never went back. Chapter 19. The second pair was Fabian and his son. He made a special trip to the backstage with Santiago to find me. At the time, I hadn't yet changed out of my costume or removed my makeup. When they saw me, their eyes lit up with awe. Santiago's cheeks were flushed, his eyes sparkling. "Pretty fairy, are you really my mom? Soon, you'll have a new mom," I said, looking at Fabian. "Congratulations. You're finally getting married." Fabian's voice was soft. "Fiora, if you're willing, I can cancel everything at any time." I was startled. Fabian. This isn't the time to joke. But Fabian knelt down, taking out a diamond ring. Fiora, let's start over, okay? I responded. Fabian, don't you think you're contradicting yourself? Fabian shook his head. No, I actually liked you for a long time. I even had Naomi pass you a love letter. But she told me I wasn't your type and that you hated me. So, I kept my distance. I gestured for the assistant to take Santiago away. Fabian, I don't believe a single word you just said. Loving someone doesn't work the way you think. You don't have to play the deep love card with me. Fabian was silent for a long time before finally telling the truth. After being rejected, I wanted to keep trying to get your attention, but Naomi was always there with me. She's beautiful and she understood me. So, eventually, I did fall for her. Isn't that what you wanted? I asked. Now you've gotten what you wanted. So why are you looking for me again? Fabian gave a bitter smile. Maybe if I hadn't found this diary, I could have let go. He took out a pink notebook from his coat pocket. Sorry, I found this at your place. Fiora, you did like me back then, didn't you? I stayed silent. The truth was, when I decided to marry Fabian, it wasn't just to help my family's company get the funding it desperately needed. The year I fell from the school stage, everyone was terrified, but Fabian was the first to rush over, stopping others from touching my injured body and calling an ambulance. As he carried me onto the stretcher, I saw the nape of his neck. It was the only moment of safety in an otherwise bloody memory. I had written about it in my diary, never expecting it to be brought to light one day. How embarrassing. Fabian continued looking at me. When we got married, I always thought you hated me, that you married me for money. That's why I treated you the way I did. It's all my fault. If I hadn't believed Naomi, if we had gotten together earlier, if I hadn't been so biased against you, would we have never missed out? Fabian, I interrupted. All those ifs don't matter. The Fiora who liked you was 16. The one standing before you is 26. It's not about who was at fault. It's that time has passed. I don't have any feelings for you now. And I don't like you anymore. Do you understand? Dragging this out isn't like you. Don't make me, and especially don't make Santi, lose respect for you, okay? Fabian's face turned pale. He whispered an apology, then stood up and staggered out. I heard that in the end, Fabian and Naomi didn't get married. Naomi returned to our parents' house, but her leg injury made her irritable, and they were miserable dealing with her. Fabian still brought Santiago to the theater occasionally to watch my performances. I instructed the staff not to let them backstage anymore. Chapter 20. The person who left the deepest impression on me wasn't someone I knew, it was a stranger. After the performance, the other audience members had already left, but this man stayed behind, holding a bouquet. He walked up to me hesitantly and asked, Miss Fiora, do you remember Joy? I nodded. He sighed with relief and told me that he was Joy's younger brother, and he had come to deliver flowers on her behalf. As soon as he mentioned her, Joy's smiling face appeared vividly in my mind again, and I felt a wave of happiness. Why didn't Joy come in person? I was saving the best seat for her. He shook his head. I'm sorry. She really wanted to come, but she couldn't make it. Half a month ago, after an unsuccessful surgery, Joy had passed away abroad. Her final wish was to see me perform on stage one last time. On the white roses he gave me, there was a card with Joy's familiar, crooked handwriting. Fiora. In the end, I couldn't win the battle with myself, but I believe that you'll keep moving forward with my part as well. In our next life, let's meet sooner, okay? Your forever friend, Joy, smiley face. My gaze lingered on the smiley face in that last line for a long time. As I stared, the writing blurred, and soon, I couldn't see anything clearly anymore. Chapter 21. A long time later, the nationwide tour ended. I told Dominic that I had sent my resume to a dance master abroad whom I admired. The resume was accepted, and she agreed to let me join her troupe, but I'd have to start from the bottom. Dominic didn't understand. Isn't your life here, in the country, good enough? Starting over sounds simple, but it's exhausting and requires too much sacrifice. I just quietly looked at him. Dominic's eyes gradually turned red. Are you doing this to avoid me? Did my feelings cause you trouble? I shook my head. Dominic, I never thought that liking someone was something to be ashamed of. When I entered my first marriage, I was like many others, thinking that love should be the most important thing in the world. But now, I've been divorced once, and I've had a child. I still believe that love is important. It connects me to each and every one of you. But now that I've completed those big milestones, I realize I'm still not satisfied. Beyond love, beyond marriage, there are so many other things I need to do. Love is important, but it can't make me stop anymore. I just want to walk the path I desire the most. Dominic asked, how long will you be gone? At least 3 years. Dominic was silent for a long time. My grandfather is sick. I won't be able to go abroad with you in these coming years. I'll go by myself. Take care of yourself. I will. Dominic continued. I won't wait for you. I replied. You don't need to. We didn't speak again. Tears slowly welled up in Dominic's eyes, spilling down his face. His eyelids were so red he could barely keep them open. He closed his eyes and hugged me tightly. Do you remember what I once told you? What? You have 100 chances to reject me. Dominic stood up, wiped away his tears, and smiled the familiar smile again. Go, Fiora. If that's what you want, then keep walking and don't look back. Because what I love is precisely that about you.